My name is Babu Nair. I'm the founder and publisher of Banking Frontiers, been running this magazine since 2002 and trying to create ecosystems and influencing the ecosystem as well as facilitating the banks and the financial sector companies and the technology sector to come together and create a beautiful banking and financial services ecosystem. Over to you, Mr. Venkateshwaran. If you can share a little perspective about you.
Good afternoon. I am Venkateshwaran, CISO of Punjab National Bank. We are into the amalgamation of multiple banks, and I being the CISO, I am spearheading the security amalgamation for the bank.
Fantastic. Mr. Lalit Mohan, can you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, good evening. So I'm Lalit. I'm senior domain expert and a co-principal investigator of 5G use cases lab at IDRBT.
Welcome, Lalit. Lalit has been doing some fantastic work, and he has also been one of the key facilitators of cloud in the public sector, in the banking sector in India. So I have got the privilege to hear a lot from him on the cloud. So welcome, Lalit. Welcome, Mr. Venkateshwaran. Mr. Pandey, can you please share us a brief introduction of yourself?
I am ASHEESH Pandey, CGM and Chief Operation Officer of the bank, and presently handling the entire operations of the bank, and as a background from the graduate field. So I would say a hardcore banker, nothing more than that.
And a fintech enthusiast.
Yeah, true.
Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Thanks.
Kamalika, can you please share a small introduction of yourself?
Hi, I'm Kamalika Perez. I am the director for Google Cloud based out of Mumbai. Along with my team, we work with a number of banks and financial institutions to see how we can best support them on their technology transformation and cloud journey. Really look forward to interacting with all of you on today's session.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Welcome, Kamalika. Avinash ji, can I have a small introduction of yours, please?
Yeah, good afternoon. I am AVINASH SHUKLA. I am DGM and CISO in UCO Bank. And on security aspects, I am looking into. But my bank, you have said that it's still not merged or not going such phases. But we are undergoing one major project that is Finacle 10 migration. So from Finacle 7 to Finacle 10 migration is going on. And within next 5 to 6 months, we will be completing that. So that is a major thing.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Welcome for this conversation, and we can also understand a lot about the challenges in migrations, which anyways is one of the most important things that is happening. Great. Welcome, gentlemen, and Kamalika. Welcome all of you, and welcome to all the 38, 39 attendees who have already joined us from the different banks in the country. So let us start this conversation with since you spoke about mergers and transformation, let's start with the transformation as a journey. On one side, the public sector banks have been doing a lot of mergers. There has been a consolidation in the industry. Obviously, there is a lot of migration going to happen or is already underway, and in many cases, it is also over. So when these ecosystems are migrating and when there is transformation from different ecosystems and data centers, what kind of new strategies are emerging in order to fast track this transformation and migrations on one side, and in the other hand, while the current is very hot in the lower part of the sea, how do you maintain the silence on the brim of the sea? The water has to be silent from the customer's perspective. How do you maintain that silence and calmness when all this hard work and hodgepodge is happening, especially in the area of transformation in the sea below? So I think, Ashish ji, I would like to start with you. You have been anyways going through a lot of transformation. So what is your take on it?
Is there coming up? And fintech, if we see as an ecosystem, are really coming very fast, bouncing back. And as a bank, now it is time for us to bounce back very fast. So this is my take, as far as the transformation is going on. So on the technology front, bouncing back very quickly, and using the fintech as a process into taking into them into the fold, having the long-term partnership and transforming. Now after post-COVID, the reach is now different. We need to reach to a customer rather than the pre-COVID what we were thinking and what we were having the processes in fold. So I think some transformation revamping is there, and all the banks in the banking industry are moving towards that. So I think transformation is going to be the key in post-COVID area.
Fantastic. Lalit, you have been, thank you very much, Ashish ji. And Lalit, you have been in the IDRBT and you have seen a lot of banks which are working with you, undergoing transformation. Specific observations you would like to share in that area?
Certainly. I think I also bring some experience of being part of a merger of a couple of US banks. While I'm not directly involved in merger activity of public sector banks in India, I keep hearing from my other colleagues at IDRBT who are part of the consulting engagements. What I felt, there are certainly the short-term goals and the long-term goals. Short-term goals are how do we get the bridges between this system to that system, either using enterprise service bus or some data exchange layers, so that the banks start communicating and the customer starts seeing as one bank, right? They walk into a syndicate bank and want to do what they would like to do at a Canara Bank. They should not have any different in experience. Now those bridges are certainly the short term. The other is what I've seen is in terms of the application consolidation. They're trying to see what is the best application between the two banks, both from functionality and non-functionality. I think this is one experience that I've been going through at Indian banks. I think there is a lot of value. There is a lot of digital transformations that Indian banks have brought through as compared to the any of the developed countries' banks, because they all had legacy systems. But I think the focus has been more in terms of the functionality rather than the non-functional requirements. When I say non-functional requirements, be it the interoperability, be it the maintainability, be it the scalability, this extensibility, I think that certainly is a requirement that has to be ingrained into the RFPs of Indian banks, so that when the consolidation happens, it's much more easier rather than just trying to compare features to features, because it's not just the features, it's the non-functional, the software engineering, the software design that's more important in terms of making it the go forward decisions. I don't see there is a negative view onto it, but I certainly see as an opportunity to improve in terms of the non-functional requirements as compared to just the functional requirements, which would help, because mergers acquisitions is not a end state, right? It's always a continuous process. Today, 2 banks, tomorrow 3 more banks. It's going to be ongoing in every business, be it the regulated or non-regulated. So the importance to be given to non-functional requirements is going to be very key.
So, Mr. Venkateshwaran, you have been also the CISO from the bank's perspective, and you have undergone the entire transformation. And when such kind of mergers and acquisition happen, one of the biggest thrust is on security, and how do you put various security systems together, integrate, amalgamate, and yet have a robust security in place. What is your thought? What has been your experience in this area?
It is a very challenging task. When we look at, one is the availability of the solutions and the interoperability of the solutions, and security. Always there will be at crossroads. So we have to build a balance between, first is we have to look at the amalgamation and the consolidation, and then we have to work towards security constantly and continuously to achieve a secure and controlled environment. So what we had done is we formed various task forces to work on this, and based on this, we looked at the various security solutions in place in all the 3 entities, and then decided to take forward one of the implementations and work towards augmenting the either the licenses or the capacity or the hardware and the networks. And see, there are various interdependencies when we try to amalgamate things. Okay, so either let us say if it is an antivirus solution or a endpoint security solution, we have to uninstall the old system in the existing setup and then bring in a new system. Then there will be the integration with various other solutions. These ought to be looked into one by one, so that whatever state we were there earlier in one of the setups is brought into the entire amalgamated entity. It's a very challenging task. We take the guidance of the various specialists or the consultants in this, so that we have a second opinion on what we are doing, whether we are in the right direction. We also speak to the OEMs to bring in the whatever is the latest, so that the best of the technologies are available, and we are able to reduce the time in this migration process. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. So the time is one of the most critical factor in the migration process. Kamalika, you are coming from a cloud background. You have been looking at fast tracking things. So ultimately, if anybody wants to fast track things, one of the great options is cloud. So what is your perspective? How are cloud? How is cloud as a technology when it comes to helping in faster migration? What any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Babu, and I think something that we come across, very often, right, in our discussions. And I think cloud, by its very nature, is designed for faster migrations, for faster development, for faster evolution of application ecosystems, right? But how to actually, achieve this in a real life scenario, let's say in the ecosystem of a bank, and how to actually have that speed of innovation and development going forward, that really is the question, right? So if you look at the way that enterprise IT has developed, right, and I think we have this very popular example that we sort of share very often with our customers, that enterprise IT or enterprise grade IT was always considered to be superior to consumer grade IT, right? Now, as enterprise IT developed, right, it became more and more complex, more and more customized, with the result that each bank or each enterprise ecosystem became almost like a unique, like a snowflake, right? It became absolutely unique in the way that it kind of was configured, right? Whereas if you look at consumer grade IT, to the point that Lalit was making earlier, it became more and more standardized, more and more interoperable, and therefore created a kind of a ecosystem of innovation, a common strata on which everybody could innovate, and more new apps and new offerings could come, right? Whereas enterprise IT became more and more complex and more unique for every entity and every organization, right? And that's partly what makes it very difficult when you're talking about whether it's mergers, whether it's bringing IT systems together, because there has been so much of customization that has been built in. There has been so much of unique features, the functional requirements that again Lalit was talking about, that has really served to make it not very interoperable, right? Now, when you look forward to ecosystems of the future, the need therefore to have a modernized application landscape, which can give the benefits, which can be secure, but at the same time interoperate with other landscapes, whether it is with the fintechs, whether it is with other banks, whether it's with an open banking ecosystem, that is critical, right? And to move towards that, to modernize your applications, to have maybe a microservices based architecture that can help you do that, but at the same time keep your pace of innovation, keep your pace of application development fast. That is really going to be the next level of technology transformation that we believe we will see.
Avinash, what has been your experiences when you are doing this bridging this migration? How are you making sure that it becomes seamless and effortless? Or probably, I know it can never be effortless, but how can you make it smooth as a transformation? What is your thought or take on it?
In our case, we are moving from one version of to another version. So means clarity or that who is going to do what, that was there. And as Venkateshwaran sir said, that main part was to form work groups, to form sub teams, to plan all the activities. But what happened that all these things has come up in this COVID scenario. Means we started the main activities, means planning was over by January or Feb, and actual activities started from March itself. So the main challenge we were facing regarding this resource mobilization. Even on hardware part, there was some hiccups that some consignments were stuck up at some places where this has started, but afterward that was smooth. But we were having main problems in this resource migration, how vendors will be able to come or will be able to support, because at that time work from home or that remote means control or access from remotes, that infrastructure was also not there. And still we are means a lot of people are struggling with the security aspect of remote access. We cannot give access to our core systems from remotely. So a lot of other things were being done. And the second most means difficult phase is regarding training. For any transformation, we have to set some work. Some means there will be cultural transformation. There will be a lot of means knowledge, information, or some practices required. So how to give training in such scenario? See, one thing is online training can be there, but in such where you have to do practical, you have to do financial transaction, you have to handle all the branch and all the operations in real time scenario. This only online training will not work. So that was a major challenge, and we have now, because of this ease on this trains are there and flights have are there, so, though in very less number, but we are doing something, some distancing we are maintaining, but we have to do that. And we have planned that also in multiple phases, that one day online training, then after 3-4 days, 2 days online training, and after that some hands-on. Then at means from last month we have organized that people should come. So instead of 10-15 days on-site training, within 7 or 5 or 7 days, we can give them all input which is required for initiating this. So these two things were there. And the third thing which we felt very important from the initiation when we were designing, and of course there was means a lot of experience was behind, because already like here Union Bank and PNB and Bank of Baroda have already migrated. They faced a lot of challenges. So we consulted with them also. Our team has visited all these three places, and we have learned from their whatever challenges they have faced, whatever learning they had. So we discussed and we used that knowledge also, so that it will be, as you said, it will not be effortless, but somewhat a smoothness, or with some smooth manner we could sail through this migration process. And last is data migration. So see, there is a lot of difference between old version data structure and new version data structure. So for that also we have planned in such a way that we have planned for that 12-13 months activity, and we have involved each and every staff, or if not each and every staff, at least all the functional staffs who are responsible for these. So that data quality, that was very important, and data cleaning, and that data validations, everything which is required for a smooth migration. And that is also going on. We are on track, and most probably in April or May we will be moving to this new version. So these were few challenges we have faced.
You rightly spoke about one important segment, which is data. And data is the center of attraction for everything. Ultimately, all the games are going to be played around data, whether it is acquiring data, whether it is managing data, whether it is using the data for customization or personalization, or it is for using the analytics of the data to identify the frauds, risks, and other things for business growth as a strategic tool. So, what have been some very interesting perspectives of data and usage of data, which you have seen in the recent past? Lalit, you have been working in the innovations for quite some time. If you can share some thoughts about it based on your understanding.
Sure. I actually am also closely working with Apache Foundation on one of their open source initiatives. They actually have an open source CBS core banking solution called vForce. what I see, I think data is certainly the talk of the town, and it is the center, right? And if you're not able to use data, I think we are missing an opportunity to explore or exploit the customer. Sorry if I'm using that term, explore, exploit. That is one of the machine learning models, also known as reinforcement learning. Um, what I see, Indian banks are gold mines, probably a diamond mines of data. Certainly, diamond is very difficult to extract, but certainly gold mines or probably the copper mines. There are a lot of structured data. The unstructured data is where I suddenly see an opportunity for Indian banks to leverage more. When I see unstructured, there are a lot of information available in the documents, in the collaterals, in email conversations, in the interactions with the customers, and more importantly, on the social media or on the internet. Now, that information, there could be knowledge graphs, knowledge bases that banks can create. There are proven technologies, organizations like Google, I think they have really mastered the art of managing, handling data, right? And their lessons, some of them are actually available as open source components for organizations to leverage. We at IDRBT are trying some of those certainly. My research project is also around one of those areas. Secondly, uh, there is always some concern in terms of data not being available for some specific modeling. The other option that I could see, which is coming also in the India AI stack, is federated learning. There are large banks, there are small banks. Probably the large banks with what they have as loan portfolios, with their customer portfolio, I think they have enough data samples to model their own algorithms. But for small banks or for banks which are just starting to leverage, preserving the privacy, doing federated learning is another opportunity. That way, there could be some common platforms. You mentioned about platform banking. Yeah, this is an opportunity to build those data platforms. That way, banks can leverage, learn across, while preserving the privacy, while ensuring the customer protection, to do better in terms of leveraging the AI and the data more and more. That's my honest opinion, and that's the way that I'm also seeing how these foundations like Apache are trying to promote some of these stuff.
Ashish ji, you have been from the operations perspective, and operations is one of the largest segments which has been working on data left, right, and center. So, what are the new opportunities that are coming with data management and the new ways in which data has been used innovatively in the operations side? You have been working on a lot of innovations right from doorstep banking to various other things in your career. What new insights can you share from the data perspective?
Yeah, actually, I fully agree with what Lalit ji has said, and you have very correctly used the word managing data. So first of all, really the two words I would agree upon. Now, the one thing, in the, you can say the public sector space or any organization, it is a gold mine of data. That is for sure. But the only, the challenge is, the data is lying in isolations. So that was the actually big challenge if you see. Now the correlating and connecting the data points from one to another is the actual opportunity lies the technology, using technology. And if we take you machine learning, now the two things are very important. When we talk about the data, the one is the machine learning where we get the patterning. So the patterns you make, and then you see the which one is the better prediction. And if you use the artificial intelligence, the articulation comes. So what I feel, the data is there, and the data connection, data points, and understanding the which data will help. So suppose if you go on the prediction side on the asset, that any account which is going to be bad down the line, maybe SMA 0 or 1 and 2. So similarly, the thing is that can we also predict that my customer, such a such customer, is going to behave like this? Maybe he would like to close my account going down 6 months down the line, or something, his behavior. So his pattern of transactions, or which way it is going, and how he can use the app of the bank or something like that. So that is one point. Now, if I take the second one, using, the machine learning and artificial intelligence, you can create like STPs coming. So when you know targeted campaigning, so you can fix up, the for car loan, you can fix up for the home loan. So depending upon his need, his age. So when a person comes to a bank and then he says that I want to add a joint name in my account. So certainly that if age is of that factor, then certainly is married. So you can plan, target a campaign related to that for that person. So this is one point. But then not only talking about the internal data, so fine, it is a gold mine, but I think, and what is my personal belief is, when you use an external data and you combine very judiciously with the internal data, it is not 2 plus 2 4, actually it is 2 plus 2 is equal to 22. So what I feel that capitalizing, on the internal data first, correlating from one point to another, because any bank is having, the complaint data as well. So whether this complaint data I can use in some modeling, somewhere, or I can use, the interaction side whenever call center interaction, and then using the external data, maybe the, bureau data, that what he has availed where and what I can, give a customer convenience, or I should say better, designing a customer journey for that.
Kamalika, you have been, at least Google has been a master of playing around with data all over the world. I think there has been no better master than Google in data. And I was listening to Sundar Pichai day before yesterday speaking at Singapore FinTech Festival on how Google is planning to create a great ecosystem together of resilience, sustainability, and an ecosystem using this entire story of data around it. Fantastic presentation by him, or a talk by him. So from a Google perspective, how are you relooking at the data now, and what kind of opportunities can you create for the financial services sector?
Oh, that's a great question, Babu, and I agree with you. That was a great presentation by Sundar. So I think a lot to learn from that. So when it comes to data, traditionally what organizations have done is it's playing a game of catch up, right? There is a certain volume of data. There is a massive data warehouse project that is planned. It takes 2 years to implement. By the time you implement, your data volume has grown even more. Not only that, it has grown in more complexity and it has grown in more characteristics, right? So in that sense, you're always, traditionally always playing catch up with, the volume of data that's growing, right? And what cloud does, therefore, is brings in that promise that you will be able to, with more elasticity, with more agility, with more flexibility, be able to handle this volume of data without necessarily going through a very long drawn out transformation project, right? Because it puts those essentially at your fingertips, the ability to crunch huge numbers of data, the ability to apply intelligence, the ability to do these things in the moment, right? And obviously to be able to derive some really strong insights out of that, right? So if you actually look at Google Cloud over the last 6 months, we've had really large and legacy banks like HSBC, like Deutsche Bank, like Lloyd's. All of these have actually taken up large transformation, cloud transformation programs on analytics, right? Because this is clearly the direction for the future, where we see innovation going. And exactly, as Lalit pointed out, that a lot of people are actually now taking the benefit of Google's analytics experience to be able to say, how do we structure this, right? And I'll take a small example, and this can be at the front end and at the back end as well, right? You look at customer interactions, right? Now, previously we thought, okay, we know enough about the customer. If we provide him an app and we give him his data, and we mine that data and we tell him what his balance is or what his transactions are, that's great, right? But customer interactions are moving into something that is now being called the age of assistance, right? You are, in a sense, trying to preempt what the customer may ask for, trying to predict what the customer may ask for, and then putting that data at his or her fingertips, right? Now, that requires a very, very different level of being able to crunch the data, but also being able to use all your AI algorithms to predict what is it that the customer needs assistance with and then provide it, right? At the back end, if you look at the way that banks are using the data, it's anything from risk reporting to liquidity analysis to a vast number of operational processes, which usually take a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of checking, to obviously to ensure, clarity and veracity. And all of that now is being done with cloud analytics, right? And being done at a very, very, much, much shorter time than it was taking previously, right? So those are the kind of examples that we're seeing actually really, really taking hold very, very fast across the banking ecosystem, with the power of analytics that cloud brings, right? And that's really the direction in which we are seeing the data revolution going.
And when we speak about data, one of the most common things that would come or hit the first thing in our mind is the security of the data. And the kind of security threats that have been coming in the past, the kind of requirements of regulations around that, which we never imagined when we did not work from home till now, has been growing. And I am sure the public sector banks are the hit the hardest, because the public sector banks never had this culture of working from home, unlike at least some of the MNC banks, or maybe all the IT companies, or some of the private sector banks. So, Mr. Venkateshwaran, as a CISO, how have you been looking at this perspective of security? What are the changing paradigms when it came to security, and how is it now slowly getting into the new normal here?
When we thought about the era before the pandemic, mostly our focus has been to protect our networks and our perimeters, and we have been working towards that. This pandemic, it opened up new challenges to us. One is the manpower management during the lockdown situations, and the continuous providing continuous services during that. And the other aspect was that managing the vendors or the critical services from different locations. And so this work from home concept, even though we were trying to adopt or selectively, there have been initiatives in all the public sector banks to bring in those concepts. But this pandemic, it expedited that implementation. Okay. See, here the focus would have been as regards work from home. One is the secure VPN networks. The other one is securing the BYOD, or the devices which are being used by either the employees or the vendors. So this brought into focus the mobile device management solutions, the two-factor authentication for the VPNs, and the data encryption methodologies. All these are being brought into focus, and the privilege identity management also. That has become the norm. The other focus has been towards bringing in resilience in the DR setups. So even though organizations were doing the drills routinely, they had been working towards managing the networks, alternate bandwidths. All these things were this thing. So now the focus has been to institutionalize these things, and the home of the vendor representative or the employee has to be brought into the network, and the secure ecosystem has to be worked towards that. It's a journey. It's a journey. Things some technologies have evolved. Some more technologies like VDI and the adoption has still to evolve. I think in a few months' time, this also will become more robust. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Avinash, as a CISO, do you have any different experience to share, especially from being a public sector bank, which is experiencing such kind of transitions into work from home and work from anywhere for the first time in many cases? What is your perspective?
Yeah. As rightly said by Mr. Venkateshwaran, that the whole focus have changed from that perimeter security to endpoint security. Now, even if we are giving access or we are giving that work from home to few resources, because in public sector banks, I don't think any bank has utilized it to the fullest extent for this managing critical infrastructure. For business, maybe it has been given. So that BYOD concept, this has come. And BYOD also not only to laptop, it is extended to either tablet, iPads, mobiles, and from everywhere this is there. And another challenge is email also. Means earlier we were not seeing email as a threat or very much means that because okay, some malware will be there, so that will be at endpoint only. But recent trends, what we have seen that from endpoint, a lot of threats and a lot of things are coming. So that part also we have to make security very robust on that part, that how email is being accessed, what are the security solutions applied on that email, and which devices we have to monitor the devices also, from which devices this official emails are being accessed and what kind of activities are being done. So this is also actually endpoint security. That focus has changed to endpoint security. This and second, I said earlier also, second challenge is that resource mobilization only. That in this, by the nature of the banks, it is very difficult to give work from home to everybody. So how to mobilize the resource, how to sustain the critical activities which are being, because it's a financial institution, one mistake will cost a lot. So that concept of BCP center was there. So we have made two, three places are BCP centers where we have isolated, and mostly we have used our training centers for that, because their lodging activity and food and all was there. So we have actually quarantined, but that was there for 6-7 months. Now we have back to normal. Though Corona is there, we are all working from offices. So these two challenges were there: that endpoint security and that resource mobilization.
Has there been any thought on this zero trust kind of security concept in the PSU banking sector? Anybody has worked on this zero trust security?
Yeah, we are in discussion with the service providers. It will take some more time. We are looking at zero trust concept. It will take some more time for institutionalizing that.
Okay. AI has been one of the strongest and a potent tool which most of us have been talking about. And I am sure that there is no organization amongst us who has not played around with this toy. Everyone has used this toy in some area or the other. So while in many of the organizations it is being used in some silo, it may be in a contact center, it may be in a branch, it can be into some other aspect of internet banking or alternate channels. Are we creating an integrated approach to give a 360-degree perspective to the bank for getting a total personalized kind of atmosphere to the customer and bringing in more delight? Has any bank in the public sector thought about this? And maybe I'll start with Lalit. Lalit, you have been into the R&D perspective too much. So have you been experiencing that in India? I'm sure you must have seen it abroad happening.
I've not seen in the abroad also in the banking sector. Let me be very honest. In my interactions, banks still take the privilege of saying that we have these many data scientists, we have these many data engineers. While that's suddenly a new word, new fashion to talk about, I have a different perspective, right? Let me share what I have a thought. If you look at software engineering, right? Traditionally, I started programming in the 90s. The developer, the tester, the implementer is all same, right? Then we went through SOX compliance. Then we said, yeah, developer, tester, implementer kind of a stuff. Then organization, tech companies started automating. They started bringing DevSecOps, trying to bring automation. I feel Now it's time that we have played enough with the toy. We have known the tool landscape. It has to be integrated into the real-time applications, right? It has to be not sitting as a silo. It should not be sitting as a separate component, but it has to be part of your mainstream applications, which means your software engineers, your developers, like they have done good coding practices, you don't tell them that you have to write commits. You don't tell them that you have to write your code modular. Similarly, they have to be aware of there is going to be data in the system, and the systems need to be self-adaptive learning, and it has to be part of the mainstream application. It cannot be, I mean, it's certainly not there in a lot of organizations I see still, but that's the right way to go rather than I do this piece and I give it to someone else who's going to play with my data, and he or she doesn't understand what the business wants. He or she doesn't understand what the application is. It's going to be just creating some more silos, right? It has to be part of the DNA of the developer.
Interesting, interesting. Thanks for that thought, Lalit. Ashish ji, you have been working in the operation side. You have been seeing a lot of innovations happening. You have also gone to, a strong level of personalization with doorstep kind of banking during COVID and getting as closer to your customer as possible. And I'm sure you must have also played around with AI in a big way. What are your thoughts on how AI is being leveraged today and how organizations can actually look at it in the private PSU banking sector?
Okay, actually, it is a very, the burning topic as on date on the BFSI. So let me come, on the few perspective before, I go a deep down the question first. The first moot point is, the amalgamation merger which is happening. Now the database which you have number of customer, if I say the cust IDs, is too huge, number one. Number two, you cannot like the earlier good olden days, you can keep track of the customer with their family and everything by name and, personal level. Now the question comes that even in BFSI now, even today, though you may use machine learning or artificial intelligence and data lakes, so on and so forth, but still, the customer in financial industry needs, the personalized touch, tailor-made sort of thing. Now there is a targeted, very clear, marketing also. Generally, we say, the mass marketing when you play with the data were like pre-approved loans for the credit cards or the personal loan or the car loan. But even then, in that also you can have a targeted subsegment. This is what the requirement is. Now, what is happening today that if we see the banks, what they are doing, more so the public sector banks. So I'm bifurcating your question into two. One is the doorstep banking separately, how we are reaching to a customer. And the second is what actually the banks are doing on the AI concept. So AI per se, we can divide, the scenarios into the two parts. The first part is short term and the second part is, the long-term solution. So long-term solution, if you really use all the silos data at one place and do fully, the integrated way AML, you need a data lake. Until unless you have a full data lake with you, and synergizing each data points and coming up with the accurate predictions and going to the target market with a specific personalized offers. Now coming to the we have a UGCL. All the banks we had a guarantee scheme during the COVID period. Now most of the banks, as per is also going with the straight through processing of the loans, credit card, personalized loan, many things. Now it uses the data. And it uses the various data it predicts. And most of the cases, banks are going on a pre-approved loan. So the data analytics is there, artificial intelligence, maybe to that data set, not maybe holistically, 360 degree, but I would say, to that extent, to a greater level, particular to that segment, are using banks are using it, and they're playing with the data very nicely, and then articulating analytics way, and then targeting the specific customer segment. Now coming to the doorstep banking, now you were talking about, and all my participants, colleagues were talking about, reaching out, work from home. So work from home is offshoot of the COVID, and that is internal. I would also put one more perspective to it. which is basically a customer. So what you are doing to run your own business, you are finding it out the ways and means for a, to do something from work from maybe endpoint or maybe the front end or whatsoever security things. But the question is, today is an app day. It is now we are in an app era. Now everybody is using app and now going through the transactions, and people like, to do the transactions or whatsoever, not only the financial, but any transactions for that sake. So they want actually to use at their convenience. Now coming, what sort of security solutions you are trying to build for the work from home? The same has to be built, for the customer to reach out to them personally. So I think now coming to the doorstep banking, yes, one of the initiative of the Public Sector Alliance and Union Bank has also been part of it very, nicely. And one of the things that customer can use all the services at their doorstep without moving. And one more wonderful thing many people may not know, a person is traveling, suppose, to from Bangalore to Mumbai, and suppose he needs 25K or maybe something 10,000K something, or maybe the account statement actually he requires at Mumbai. Within 2 hours he can get the same account. Within 2 hours, 1 hour, he can get the location where he or she is in. So that sort of. Now coming to specifically, there is a life certificate also. So, you can play with the data and specifically reach out to them, the senior citizen, and then, offer them specifically, because they may not use the other services, but specifically life certificate after this November, they will be keen to, rather than going to the bank branch and, having the risk of the COVID. So better approaching to the branch and using the, so we did that also, approaching personalized way to different customers so that they can use further doorstep. So I believe, this artificial intelligence articulation predicting is going to be order of the day next 3 to 6 months, 1 year down the line. That's my take.
Great. I think that's a fantastic encapsulation of how things have been going. And you are basically, the more facilities you get, you spoil your customers. And then the customer gets spoiled to expect more from you. Okay. And then it becomes a part of the system for all of us. Great. Kamalika, from your side, when it comes to AI integration and integration of all these silos, what's new happening globally? What are financial institutions doing, and what you have new to share to the bankers here?
Yeah, so I think, when the whole lockdown happened, right, I think there was a sudden upsurge that we saw in some very specific AI areas, like you yourself mentioned, Babu, earlier, right? One was, this whole, customer onboarding or KYC, right? How does one do it in a virtual world? And how do you then use AI tools to help you, sort of facilitate that process, right? So if you have to recognize somebody's ID, if you have to correlate that to the person's face when they're coming on a call, how do you use AI to do that, right? So this was one of the sort of topmost questions that immediately hit a lot of, banks and financial institutions. Other one was actually also, call centers, right? Because people were not coming into the call centers were not manned sufficiently. How could we use voice assistants to give a similar, experience to the customer, right? So these were the two of the questions that kind of immediately came up. But close upon this, and I think, Ashish actually sort of laid it out very, very nicely, that the experience that you're aiming to provide the customer at the branch, or let's say online in some parts, but let's say it wasn't fully there, how can you give him that branch experience wherever he is? So if you're doing a branchless banking, how do you actually make that happen for the customer wherever he or she is, right? And I think this was actually one of the very, very core topics that a lot of banks started pondering, and there was AI that was built into every aspect of the solution, whether you want to provide them a conversational interface in their own language, whether you want to have recognition of pictures and things like that, which which help the recognition of the customer, and in some cases even voice recognition to enable authentication. Those AI tools were used, and I would say this was done it wasn't that it was across the board, but AI was certainly infused in a lot of these customer interaction points that came up, right? To your point now, if you take a broader view, that how are organizations infusing AI, right? Is it happening as a broad program, right? And to my mind, it works both ways. It can have very practical use cases like we saw in the lockdown, that AI actually stepped in certain cases where it solved a specific problem. But broadly, banks also adopting, let's say, programs where they have data scientists, etc., etc., and those are all starting points, right? We know that it hasn't been broadly adopted, as Lalit said, right? But with the democratization of AI, and I call it that because I think what we have at least seen in Google Cloud is that it's getting easier and easier to infuse AI into your daily work, right? So it's not something that's very esoteric, that's only being worked upon in a separate room by a group of people whom people don't really understand, but it's really something that's getting embedded into every aspect of your work, right? I'll give you a simple example. So we have, let's say, worksheets, right? Where you have data, you're inputting data and you're working with the worksheets that have a lot of data. You can ask it a question saying, I want to find out what average receivables has been for the last 3 months, right? A voice enabled question. And the sheet gives you the answer, right? Now that's again an application of AI, but it's very, very simple and in a way that other people can use it, right? Google has come up with something called Auto ML, which helps people who may not necessarily have Python and coding experience and all of that to build data models, right? It's all about the democratization of IT tools, whether it's AI or whether it's the rise of what we call no coding environments, that actually makes this more pervasive, and it really something that can actually be embedded in multiple things, right? But I think the core of the philosophy again, Babu, is that it is a little organic, right? It is not something that can be mandated, go and do AI, right? It has to be business led, because it has to have the business context that AI will be useful in this particular use case or that particular use case, and it has to find its way into the organization through these business use cases that then establish the case for a broader AI agenda, right? And that's what we are also seeing in a lot of banks, and that's what we see taking shape across a lot of organizations everywhere.
Great, excellent. That's a good wrap up. One last thing that I would like to have a quick round of is basically about what ecosystems are we trying to look for the future. There are so many fintechs coming into place. The fintechs are an integral part of our businesses. There are a lot of engagements with fintechs being happening with the banking sector. Of course, public sector banks have been a little later entrant into that space, but they have virtually caught up. So what kind of ecosystems are we creating, especially with the fintechs and with the innovations in the future? Ashish ji, would you like to share some thoughts on this?
Actually, you have touched by now, whenever you say the fintech. So the basic question for today for any organization, is the trade-off between develop and deploy. The capabilities which fintech has developed. Now, if you want to, the develop on yourself, it involves two things. One is the cost and another is time. And both again has a cost factor.
And
So the question is, the trade-off of the organization, the banks has to do is, should I develop or should I deploy? Number one. So deploy in the sense using the maybe fintech or the solution. So I would, rather than fintech, so I will coin them as a solution provider rather. And the fintech, if I take as a call, it is basically a marriage. It has to be a long-term perspective, the long-term relationships with the fintech partners. The second question comes, innovation or legacy. Again, there is a trade-off. So if we go with the innovation, then certainly, the positive side on the fintech is they are quick in response, number one. Number two, they are innovative. And the third is the understanding, the requirement of the major partner. The synergies is the third important point. The banks do have a lot of data, a lot of things, a lot of system and procedure in place. Now, what actually is required is, having somewhere, the gaps which are filling into with the help of the fintechs. What we are going to see is a slight challenge will be there for the fintechs as well because of the capital and scalability. So probably we may see, some consolidation as well, or maybe realigning themselves with the major partners, or maybe even the solution providers. Like, any solution provider comes to a bank. So probably it can be a, part of investment or something like that, where, because they are scarce of capital. They do have resource capacity and capabilities. What actually required as on date is, to build up on the scalability and build up on the capacities. And I think this is going to be game changer.
Fantastic. Great. That's a very good encapsulation of the entire concept. Lalit, you are working on one of the very interesting and forward-looking labs in India, especially when it comes to 5G and innovations that can happen with 5G. What is your experience on creating the ecosystems?
So I cannot agree more than what Ashish ji talked about. Certainly, very valid inputs. From IDRBT perspective, what we are trying to do is, I think fintechs is now an acceptable norm, right? We just have to see how we take it forward in terms of furthering the collaboration. Now, what we are doing at IDRBT is setting up the context, setting up the platform for the next generation fintechs. So we are looking at AR, VR. I think if we had done this enough, the collaboration or some of the challenges in terms of interfacing with the customers or training of the customers or the employees with AR, VR could have been much simpler, right? I don't know how many of you have played with the AR app that Google created with the tiger and all that. It was funny. It was good, right? Right. So I think that's the next thing that we could see. IoT is next another big thing that we would see it. IoT in terms of smart appliances. It's not very far. You know, it's Friday evening. It's time for the beer, and probably the fridge realizes that this is the flavor that Lalit likes and goes orders. I don't drink beer, by the way. So yeah, but yeah, I think there are those smart fridges, smart TVs, micro payments. That's certainly going to be a norm. I think at the IDRBT, the platform that we are trying to create is with the 5G features. In fact, we already started getting into some conversations on 6G. 6G would mean 1 terabytes per second on a mobile phone. So we are still dealing with 5G, and we are still talking about what 5G means for India. We are creating an experience lab for fintechs to come, put their shows cases, put their experiments, have banks come and understand the technology, collaborate with the fintechs. So we are open to organizations. In fact, AWS, Google is not part of it. AWS is part of our journey already. We have CDOT, we have government organizations, we have DFS directly blessings. So DOT directly working with us. So this is certainly for fintechs, banks, an experience lab to understand what is the emerging technology 3 years, 5 years from now, and try to build the applications. It's also important for banks to think now, because if 5G has to be, I mean, certainly 5G is going to be a reality, right? It's a matter of time. Now, it is important for banks to understand how they start writing their RFPs so that they don't have to go through the process of rewriting it to meet the requirements of the 5G specifications. So one key thing is going to be cloud. One other important thing is going to be API banking.
Kamalika, before I wind up, I want to know from you, how are you facilitating new ecosystems of fintechs and banking, and what you are doing it globally?
No, so I think everything that all the participants said are really things that we are working on facilitating and and growing. The one aspect that I thought I would touch upon is that a lot of this is actually enabled by a robust and comprehensive API management system, right? And it's really how these connections are made, and the engine of monetization is driven through that, right? And we are seeing that now in India in earnest. So Google Cloud, of course, has a solution called Apigee, which is known as the leader in this domain. But in general, if I have to make a general statement, I think the interest in having a modern API management framework that then builds an ecosystem, lends itself to monetization, and then becomes a conduit for the overall development of the financial goals of the country, in a sense, is something that we're seeing more and more. So this is great example. We have a bank BRI, in Indonesia, who actually took on this goal of financial inclusion through something that was enabled by the Apigee API management system, right? And it created this network of branchless agents who are able to act like like mobile branches of the bank, and therefore be able to actually cast the net of financial inclusion much wider, right? And it created this huge ecosystem on which applications, services, businesses could then flourish and there was greater monetization for everybody, right? So again, a great example of how something that as simple as you think of as an API, right? But when you use it right and when you build an ecosystem around it, it really creates that channel for, whether it is, information, whether it is, collaboration, monetization, and all of that to flow and create that true, open banking or, open ecosystem.
Would Mr. Venkateshwaran or Mr. Avinash would like to share any last minute thought before we wind it up?
Yeah, I just want to add something regarding this VR and AR and other things have been discussed. So see, we are regulated by regulatory authority, and a lot of compliances and a lot of regulations are there. Under that, we have to work. So what I have seen that recently video KYC, for video KYC, RBI had given permission and circular has given. So this may be the entry point for this VR and AR also to be used in banking. And we have just introduced, apart from this video KYC, we have just introduced that life certificate for pensioners on that video KYC platform. So that either he can go to branch or he can send, he can use the doorstep banking, so that that can be collected. Otherwise, he can give a request on the app for this video KYC or video life certificate, and call will be registered. And then within 24 hours, he'll receive a call, video call, and whatever formalities and procedure is there. Within 5 minutes, his life certificate will also be accepted by the bank sitting customer at home. So like Ashish sir said, that another perspective, that work from home for us, for employees, then it should be for customers also. So in that way, regulators are also helping a lot, and they are also realizing and using the norm, so that we can use these technologies and we can move further.
Fantastic. That was a great. Mr. Venkateshwaran, anything to end it up?
Yeah, see, artificial intelligence banks are already using in some of the areas like fraud analytics and the early warning systems. They are emerging. Okay. One more thing which banks have been exploring is the robotic process automation of automating the common repetitive tasks which are done manually, voluminous tasks, and this is a stepping stone towards bringing in artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Excellent. I think that was a good encapsulation. And thank you, gentlemen and Kamalika, for sharing some very interesting perspective. And of course, I had a lot more questions with me, but we will not be able to take all that up due to the paucity of time. But we came upon some very interesting live examples of how organizations like that of Union Bank and Avinash also shared some fantastic instances of AR and VR. Of course, Lalit has always been out of the world with his innovations and sharing. And I am really looking forward to your 5G innovation hub to look at what the future of banking should be. And I would probably also love to work closely, whatever way I can support you in this initiative. And I am sure Google Cloud will also like to join this initiative and check out how this 5G hub can create a better banking ecosystem for the industry. And Mr. Venkateshwaran, for your very, very interesting security related perspectives and answering the question also to the, to the attendees about robotic process automation. Thank you very much for all these interesting insights.